Hello, and a very warm welcome to you all from the Palais de Congrès in Marrakesh, Morocco. My name is Chia Robertson. I'm a journalist and a gender equality champion, and I'm delighted to be moderating today's event at the annual meeting of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. The Ukraine crisis is dominating the meeting here. The war has had a disproportionate impact on women and minorities. At the same time, we face multiple challenges: economic and social impact of COVID, rising inflation around the world, increasing poverty, and of course, climate change. So what can we do? Well, in a moment, we're going to be hearing from a diverse panel of experts and innovators about how inclusive, gender-led solutions have a very big role to play. But we also want to know what you think in the audience. If you're online and you want to join in, log into slido.com and put in the code #917000. That's #917000. Then go to the event Equality. It's all working. You can start by asking your questions, and we'll be putting them to our panel. And actually, together in the room, together with anyone, any questions here from anyone here, just put your hand up, and our panel will be ready. We'll be doing that later in the hour. And a reminder too, this event is going to be translated in English and in French. So now, I'm delighted to welcome Odile, Reno, Besso, the President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. A magical moment for the bank, Odile, because it's the first in-person meeting for 3 years. Welcome.
Good morning to all of you, and as you said, it's really a pleasure, immense pleasure, to be here in person, being able to interact, to liaise, to meet, to discuss, and to open this very important discussion on promoting equality of opportunities in times of crisis. This topic is at the heart of our strategy on equality of opportunity, which the EBRD's Board of Directors approved last November. We also adopted a new gender strategy, which will guide our activities to advance women's economic empowerment over the next 5 years. Promoting equality of opportunity and gender equality is not just a moral imperative. Of course it's one, but it's not only that. The business case for greater inclusion in all groups of society have been made over and over again. For example, we know that if we ensured that women participate equally with men in the economy, we could at least add $400 billion to our countries of operations GDP by 2025, so in 3 years. And if we were able to give the quarter of the people across the EBRD regions that currently do not possess the digital skills to perform standard office tasks the right training, we would deliver an enormous boost to our economies. Such plans are relatively easy to draw up in good times. But in difficult times, there is a risk to fall back in old habits, such as rely only on groups that have dominated our economy and leadership roles for decades or even centuries. But this is, in times of crisis, this is also really when we need each and every one of us to contribute. Only when every individual counts for our economies, but also our communities, can we withstand and overcome whatever shocks history inflicts on us. Our 2 new strategies firmly reflect this belief. Both strategies were conceived against the backdrop of an unprecedented health and economic emergency. Last year, I committed to ensure that our region's recovery from the COVID pandemic will not be a return to business as usual, but that we will build back better. And I believe that at EBRD, we have been doing just that. At the end of 2021, 35% of our signed projects included elements specifically promoting gender equality. And around 15% of the projects were focused on the economic inclusion of underserved groups more broadly. But now we face a new crisis in the shape of Russia's war on Ukraine, and the damaging impact it is having on the people, businesses, and communities of Ukraine and the wider region is huge. The EBRD's response to this crisis demonstrates the importance we attach to preserving and safeguarding the human capital in our regions. We do this by building on our strong private sector mandate, working hand in hand with clients. At the same time, we create opportunities for those facing barriers because of who they are, where they were born, or circumstances outside their control, such as the senseless violence and destruction of this war. And we apply this human capital lens into our crisis response. We are supporting, for example, our private sector clients to tackle the critical workforce challenges, such as the skill gaps caused by staff attrition, involuntary relocation, or the need to quickly integrate and upskill refugees and internally displaced persons. We extend credit line for businesses that are directly or indirectly affected by the war, helping them to continue operating and providing jobs. We work with municipalities and utility companies to ensure the continued provision of vital services to all. And we also support clients in making sure their policies and practices offer effective protection against the risk of gender-based violence and harassment, because this risk is particularly high in a context of violence and fragility. This focus on supporting livelihoods and continued access to economic opportunities is crucial, not only to mitigate the most damaging impact of the crisis right now, but it's crucial also to build a solid foundation for recovery in the future. And we should not forget the other megatrends that continue to pose risk, but can also bring opportunities for reduced inequalities and greater human capital development across our region. I'm thinking about climate change, urbanization, the future of work, migration. It is vital that no one is left behind. And our clients are a constant source of inspiration on this. That's why I'm looking forward to be hearing from some of the entrepreneurs of our regions today how they grapple with our generation's most pressing challenges and turn them into opportunity for growth. At the EBRD, we are fully aware that we cannot deliver on these commitments alone, but that only partnership with others, the private sector, policymakers, civil society, will be able to navigate these stormy seas. I'm looking forward to hearing from today's panelists how they can continue to collaborate and to champion equality of opportunity in the middle of the crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Odile, and the challenges laid bare there, and also the challenges and opportunities for the bank at this critical time. It's the perfect cue now to hear from the next one of our panel, Dr. Caterina Levchenko, Ukraine's Governmental Commissioner for Gender Policy, joining us from Kiev in Ukraine. Welcome, Caterina. Now, we're going to be hearing from you now. I think we have a very small, just a small question, unmuting. I think we've all been there before. I've done it hundreds of times. Perhaps you could unmute, Caterina.
I'm unmuted, and can you hear me?
Perfectly. You're absolutely. We can hear you all. I'm just going to welcome you again. So we're ready to hear from you. Thank you for joining us from Kiev, Ukraine. Caterina, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for invitation to take part in this important forum. And on behalf of the government of Ukraine, I also would like to express my sincere greetings to all the participants of this high-level event. And as you know, 2.5 months ago, the Russian Federation launched morally unacceptable and politically undefensible war in Ukraine. We are enduring dark times, which, among other devastating effects, exacerbate existing gender inequalities. The war has severe impact on social cohesion, security, and resilience of local communities, especially women and girls. Regular shelling and bombing of civilian infrastructure, residential areas, evacuation trains, buses and cars, schools and kindergartens, atrocity crimes, including systematic rapes and sexual violence committed by Russian soldiers at the occupied territories, have led to thousands of killed women, men, and children, hundreds of destroyed and damaged towns and villages, polluted rivers, and mined fields. Just some figures. More than 1,600 educational institutions, schools, colleges, universities, and around 500 hospitals have been damaged or destroyed, as well as more than 32 million square meters of housing. We are witnesses of the biggest migrant flow in Europe since the Second World War, and now around 12 million Ukrainians have been displaced from their homes. We consider that around 7 million are within Ukraine and more than 5.5 million abroad. And women and children constitute approximately 90% of all the displaced from Ukraine, and they face the risk of trafficking in human beings, gender-based violence, labor exploitations, etc. If speak about occupied territories, our citizens are encountering the threat of rape as a weapon of war, as growing evidence of sexual violence emerges from areas retaken from retreating Russian forces. One more important matter. In the age of social media, information warfare is another front line. Since Russian state media is still calling war a special military operation and engage its own unprecedented form of myth-making, its main goal is to spread the policy of mistrust of Ukraine. Yet the facts are stubborn, ignoring of military invasion in eastern Ukraine, following annexation of Crimea, and inaction of international community in 2014 has led to the collapse of global security system and ineffectiveness of international human rights mechanisms, largest humanitarian crisis in Europe since middle of 20th century, and a threat to future global food security, which we are facing now. But I believe that distortion of facts and unsuccessful efforts of Russian Federation to deny atrocities committed at the occupied Ukraine territories won't let them escape criminal responsibility for the war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide. I call on you, dear partners and friends, to support in every possible way setting up reparation and compensation mechanisms. Already in March this year, Ukraine has sustained material damages to the amount of over 1 trillion, according to our Prime Minister's statement. The full cost of Russia's aggressive war on Ukraine remains to be seen, but already thousands of civilians have died and cultural property and key civilian infrastructure has been destroyed. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has announced an initial €2 billion resilience package of measures to help citizens, companies, and countries affected by the war in Ukraine. Thank you for this unwavering support to Ukraine and our people and condemnation of the Russian aggression. And I wish to emphasize that restoration process needs to ensure equal rights and opportunities for women and men, and accessibility requirements taking into account gender perspective, which could be assured through engagement of respected experts. All Ukrainians have joined together to protect democracy, human rights, and fundamental freedom. But we continue to rely on you, honorable partners, your support and commitment to condemn this cruel war and genocide of the Ukrainian people. To everyone who gathered today for this event, online and offline, I wish fruitful work. And to all of us, I wish peace. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your solidarity. And thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you, Caterina. Caterina is not going away. She's going to be joining us for the panel. We hope that she is still there. Now we've got good sound. So let's begin by introducing the rest of our panel. So, Odile, founder of Fazla, a green tech platform that you built to help companies manage their unsold inventory. And also, Cécile Rayon, head of migration and sustainable development at the International Organization for Migration in Geneva. Also here, joining us at the end, in Marrakesh is Barbara Rambusek, Director of Gender and Economic Inclusion at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Barbara is, of course, the bank's equality compass. Joining us from Brussels, I'm here, fingers crossed, we will have Caterina Matanova, Deputy Director General at the European Commission's Directorate General, Neighbourhood and Enlargement Negotiations. Welcome, Caterina. And also, down the line, from Cairo, Ahmed Hazem, welcome, Director of Falak Startups, helping Egyptian entrepreneurs scale up and flourish. Right. I would like to begin with Caterina. You've been speaking to us for a little while now. Let me start. More than 5 million people have fled Ukraine since the beginning of the crisis, since the Russian invasion began, according to the UN. The majority women and children. So right here and now, we want to know, why is economic opportunity and empowerment so important? That's to you, Caterina.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Really, we already consider that more than 5 million
and I run a social restaurant in Marrakesh, Morocco, that gives women from disadvantaged backgrounds the opportunity to learn professional cooking skills and get their first job in the food industry. I started my business in Marrakesh because women in Morocco make up only 25% of the labor force, which means that women's work is largely underpaid and undervalued. The main challenge ahead for me is building a food business that is good for people and for planet. That means at every stage of the value chain, that it is good for employees, good for customers, good for suppliers, and has a good carbon footprint. Focusing on equality is important to me because even though we see cooking as mainly women's work, the food industry is still largely male-dominated. I also think that we should see women from disadvantaged backgrounds not as victims to be saved, but as experts at living in adversity and living with scarcity. And that expertise makes them amazingly resilient employees. So it's a win-win all around.
That's a win-win from, that was Nora from the Amal Center in Morocco, her inspiring story. Crisis into opportunity. Dr. Levchenko, we're going to come back to you there because the video played a bit earlier. I was talking there about the millions of people who have fled Ukraine, many of them women and children, the majority. Why is economic opportunity and empowerment so important right now?
Yeah, thank you for your question. And first of all, I'd like to stress that we do not want you look at Ukrainian refugees only as victims of a Russian military aggression. Our people have big human and economic potential, using of which will be win-win process both for hosting countries, receiving economies, and for Ukrainians abroad. And in addition, I'd like to share with you my vision of what can be done to support and empower them in terms of economic opportunity. And access to school and early childhood education becomes a critical element here. Nearly 2 million children are among Ukrainian refugees, maybe even more than 2 million. And to ensure possibility for women to work, it is important to give opportunity for schools and daycare for children. Expanding the care infrastructure will increase the labor participation rate of women, especially young women. And as Ukrainian refugees are mostly directed to immigration offices on arrival, it is important for host countries to offer integrated services at the point of entry into the system through a closer cooperation between immigration, employment, social services, something like one-stop shop. At least setting of a central information and guidance repository to member states which links to different rules. And I know that many refugees might not have their qualification, such as degrees, and with them. So a quick approach to raise you such degrees and diplomas is needed. For example, at the basis of the Council of Europe and UNESCO qualification passport for refugees, and at the standards of the Convention of Recognition of qualification concerning higher education in the European region, so-called Lisbon Recognition Convention. And the last, opening economic opportunities for Ukrainian women who are abroad, refugees, displaced people, is important for decreasing their vulnerability. The existing imbalance of power may lead to situations where there is violence and harassment at the working place, labor exploitation, trafficking, as I mentioned in my keynote speech. And we know already about such several cases in different countries. So there is a joint responsibility of the governmental institutions, the social partners, employers, and civil society organizations to implement preventive approach and monitor situation to give a lot more opportunities for Ukrainians to open their potential abroad. Thank you.
Cecile, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now. Your organization has dealt with complex migration crises before. So how is this crisis unique? And what are you seeing on the ground in terms of the critical areas where women and children need support?
Thanks a lot, Jill. And good morning to all. Indeed, this crisis is unprecedented in so many ways. Starting, of course, with the staggering figures of people that have been displaced. And if you allow me, I'd just like to give you some really recent figures, actually, that the IOM issued yesterday in terms of the fact that we're now counting 8 million people displaced within Ukraine. And you have to add to that almost 6 million Ukrainians, as well as third country nationals, so migrants that were in Ukraine, that have been now forced out of the country. I think what is really interesting is also to realize that In parallel, we are witnessing quite a number of people returning back to Ukraine. 2.7 million Ukrainians have made the choice of returning back to Ukraine. But 93% of them are not returning to their places of origin. They're adding up to the number of internally displaced in Ukraine. So 93% of the returnees are not going back home. So this is having some critical importance in terms of the response that we are providing. And it was very clearly said by the previous speakers that the demographics as well of this crisis make it absolutely unique. I think that's the first time in history where we have so many, such a prevalence of women, but as well children on the move. 50% of Ukrainian children, as we speak, are displaced. This is quite incredible. And we understand the weight this is having on the women that end up having the responsibility of single parenting. So what we have done is that we're running regular surveys with affected populations to understand where their needs are. And then I'm coming back to your question. And we can see that the needs have been evolving in the past months. And right now, 2/3 of the respondents to those regular surveys indicate that what they really need right now is most and foremost cash assistance to cover food needs as well as having access to medical expenses. And that's a 49% increase compared to previous surveys. So what does it mean? It means that those people are running out of money. The money that they had to weather the hard time at the beginning is running out. So this is a huge priority. What we're seeing as well is an increasing need on the side of having access to shelter, with the fact that more and more infrastructures and houses are being destroyed, and I think we heard very clearly about it. So what we need to do is also to clearly, and I think that was said, take into account that with such a demographic for this crisis, the issue of preventing sexual exploitation and abuse should take central stage. I just wanted to applaud the work that is ongoing right now in terms of running at-scale information campaign in Ukraine, reaching out millions of people, working as well with influencers on Instagram. So really trying to find all the ways that we have at our disposal to make sure that the risks and the remedy action are known to all. And finally, if you allow me, I think I've been talking a lot about the immediate needs, but we really have right now to think of the mid to long-term needs. And I really want to quote some very important words that were said before me about the agency of women, how we are able to build on the agency of those women that are displaced in order to help us find the solutions for the mid to long-term recovery process.
Thank you, Sil. And one of those areas that we'll be talking about is financial inclusion. Now, I'd like to go straight to Caterina Matanova. I know that Caterina, her time is scarce. Financial inclusion, a key enabler to boost prosperity and opportunity. What steps are you taking in Ukraine and globally? And what are the results?
For having me here, and sorry that I cannot participate in person in Marrakesh. Before I get to answer your question, and again, apologies for me having to skip out after my intervention. I just want to say the panel is called Equality of Opportunity in Times of Crisis. And I just would like to say, and we are talking about Ukraine, and both Caterina from Ukraine and my pre-speaker from the IOM spoke very eloquently of what's happening in Ukraine and the violence and the really unenviable situation that women face. But let me take a little bit sort of a step back and say equality of opportunity, especially the leg up that vulnerable groups and deprived communities need, is a tall order and is tricky in the best of times, in peaceful times. And we know from history, we know from all continents, whether it's the Roma in Eastern Europe or whether it's indigenous communities in Australia or Latin America, you have equality of opportunity challenges at the best of times. And now we have, after 2 years of COVID, we stopped talking about COVID, but it's very much still present with us. And with all the all the difficult impact on the economies, on societies, on families, and especially on women in many cases, when the terrible war started. And we are now discussing concretely Ukraine, and it's tragic, and the violence is appalling, something that we could not imagine in Europe in the 21st century, and suddenly it's a reality in front of our eyes. But also the impact of the war is going to be something that's going to be felt throughout the world. And the more you come from a deprived community or a vulnerable group, the more affected you are going to be, whether it's increased energy prices, whether it's food shortages, whether it's massive migration movements. There is going to be very, very big impact. And so before I answer the financial inclusion question, I just want to say that I'm really, really proud of the Ukrainians, and I'm really, really hoping that good will prevail over evil, and Slava Ukraini, and we are really fighting not only for yourselves, but for all of our freedom. Now, on to the financial inclusion. Look, it's financial inclusion for the European Commission is something that we have been working on for a number of years through a variety of various programs, support, technical assistance, but also putting significant amount of resources into it, whether it's through direct grants, whether it's through blending, whether it's through our new guarantee program, the EFSD. In fact, we work very closely with EBRD traditionally on programs like Women in Business, and for programs to bring financial inclusion into the communities. We are working with, for example, the Central Bank of Egypt in the integration of gender in their financial inclusion strategy. And in terms of the amounts of money we are talking about, you know, hundreds of millions of euros that have gone over the last 3-4 years into financial inclusion programs in our geographies, which is the southern neighborhood, the eastern neighborhood, and Western Balkans and Turkey. But what we are specifically trying to do with our partner institutions is not only set up the financial inclusion tools, but also to address the obstacles that women face when accessing credit, when setting up businesses. And often these are of non-financial nature. Yes, there is an aspect of having harder time accessing credit, for example, for a lack of a longer credit history, but there are also cultural norms and prejudices and support or lack thereof of the family structures for women to pick up business. Women have to take care of children, often engage in unpaid domestic work. So this often leads to big underrepresentation of women in the labor market. And we may actually see a different situation in Ukraine as a result of the war, where men have been mobilized to take up arms, and actually, you know, you will need to mobilize into the labor market more and more women. But I think that we all need to really work hard on two things: both setting up the actual financial instruments, and I believe that our several windows under our European Fund for Sustainable Development will cater to this, including innovative instruments such as social bonds, gender bonds, etc. But really marry it with the technical support, the coaching, the facilitation to help women overcome the other barriers, non-financial barriers to business. And I think this is something that we all should connect our sources, our hands on. And the last point on Ukraine, that what we have done now is we actually looked at our programming of the past and repurposed it to really be relevant at the moment. So with GIZ, we are working on a micro grant scheme for the internally displaced people, so they can take up some businesses, and also our repurposing EU for Business program with GIZ that is providing urgent support to small businesses, including support to their relocation to safer areas, etc. But this is just some examples of what's the tall order and what's needed, and whether we are looking at globally at many areas of conflict and difficulties, or whether we are looking at Ukraine itself, I think that any effort that will be directed towards support for women, for vulnerable groups, for children, for Roma, for example, in the Western Balkans and also Eastern Europe, I think no euro will be wasted on this.
Caterina,
thank you very much for having me on the panel.
Thank you very much. I know you've got a rush, so thank you for your contribution now. Thank you very much. Now I want to bring in Ahmed Hazem. Earlier we saw Nora in the video talking about empowering women in an industry dominated by men. Ahmed, in your experience, what obstacles prevent women from entering the job market, and how do you remove those barriers?
All right. First of all, thank you very much for having me. And before I answer that, I just want to shed some light onto the point of the wars and everything that's going on right now. I just wanted to express my deepest solidarity and feelings for the Ukrainians. And while we're at it, we also don't want to forget that we had been oppressed before as Egyptians. In the modern age also we have always been, for the better part of the last century, Palestine had been also a victim of such criminal wars and affairs. So that's also worthy of putting attention to, because there are both women, children, and all kinds of people over there as well. And to the point of to your question about the challenges that the women in entrepreneurship would face, let me start by sharing a story with you, and with that will come the basic challenge that we see. And for us as an investor in startups and in entrepreneurs, that's what we basically look for: entrepreneurs that are building technology solutions to solve big problems. And if it's the case in a female founder, then here you go with the problems. So the problem would be with that specific story, which is a founder that's called Noor. I found Noor while scrolling on LinkedIn, and while I was scrolling, I found that Noor was having her own little protest about the investors that she had spoken to, and the investors had specific questions for Noor, and the questions were of such nature that would never be asked to a man. So that's where the thing begins, and that's where I think is actually a good thing, because for as long as I had worked in this job, I've never really knew what the problem was, and now it manifested into an objective, even if I don't agree with it, but it was an objective opinion. And the objective opinion or concern was that if Noor had to leave her startup or leave her company to get married or have children, what would happen? What would be the fate of this company? And that was, as much as it's not the best question that would have been put or been asked to Noor, it still shows what people are thinking. And maybe that's why that's not only Noor's case. That's the case in mostly the MENA region where we're interested, and that resulted into the contribution of funds that went into female-founded companies does not exceed 2% of the total funding of companies that are in the MENA region, that are startups for that matter. And that's basically the problem. And if you want to know what we could be missing out for establishing or maintaining such mentality or such criteria when investing in companies, we need to take a step back or a couple of steps back and look at what innovations and what things that we could have missed on if we do not back and support women innovators. And the list is long. I mean, you have starting with a lady who made computers after computers were only speaking in numerical code, to change that and basically teach computers how to speak. That's Lady Grace Hopper, who introduced the language, the programming language, that first programming language that could speak in like a natural human language. And then if I believe all of us, even you guys, I didn't make it there, but you all used your GPS to get to the conference, and with that you maybe used your Bluetooth or maybe use the internet via Wi-Fi or anything. That if you use any of that, you still have a lady to be thankful for, which is Hedy Lamarr. And of course, not to mention the first lady who introduced filter coffee, which is basically also making a lot of way and paving the way for many other inventions to happen, because we know how much coffee it would take for someone to invent something.
Thank you.
So,
Ahmed, thank
sorry?
you. I'm very aware that we have to move on because we're not going to have time to get contribution really very, very interesting about what you're doing as an entrepreneur. Let me move quickly on to Barbara. You know, as your bank unveils a €2 billion resilience package to help citizens, companies, and countries affected. In this sort of field, can you give me some examples of how a gender lens could potentially have a positive impact?
Thank you very much, Gio, and it's a great honor to be here today and to listen also to the other speakers. I think at EBRD, integrating a focus on gender, integrating a focus on equality of opportunity is something that is now the way that we do business. It's not always been like that. I think we have learned also from previous crises, the Syria crisis response that we had, but also COVID, of course, that it's not just about bricks and mortars. It's not about reconstructing bridges and roads. It's actually about rebuilding lives. And there are many different facets to the inequalities that are exacerbated as a result of conflict, as a result of longer-term crises such as climate change. And we need to have the tools in place and integrate those into how we do business across different sectors. Let me give you two specific examples. Where we see also new opportunities, areas where we can do more, where we haven't really done as much in the past. One area is clearly the care economy. So this is a sector where we've only just tentatively started to explore what we can do, but particularly now in relation to the huge movement of people, primarily women and children, out of Ukraine, within Ukraine, we see a much heightened need for these sort of interventions. So what can we actually do? We can work with our corporate clients to integrate a focus on better provision of care as part of their employment package, for them to partner with care providers, with issue childcare vouchers, things like that. That's one area. The other is direct investment in care provision in either private or public sector at a municipal level, for example. It's something we're piloting now in Turkey, but could take beyond that. And then it's about taking the private sector voice into shaping national level care provision and care policies. To give you an example, in Egypt, companies that employ more than 100 women have to put in place care provision. What do companies do? They employ less than 100 women. So it actually completely backfires. So it's about getting rid of those policy choices and policy barriers. Another area is to tackle systemic structural challenges that may exist in countries already. One example is Poland, where there's a huge housing crisis. We have about 40% of people there living in crammed and unsuitable housing, really, compared to about 18% across the EU. So now we have an influx of 2.5 million people in addition to that, exacerbating that crisis. So it's not just about refugee housing, it's actually about tackling longer-term challenges, and in that sense also, in a way, planting the seed for longer-term solutions.
Thank you, Barbara. And now let's hear from one of our entrepreneurs in Kosovo who's training young women in tech while addressing a skill shortage.
Hello everyone, my name is Hana Serimi and I run two tech companies in Kosovo, Digital School and Star Labs. At Digital School we teach kids and teens programming skills we have become a successful franchise operating in over 50 locations globally while educating thousands of kids in programming skills. While through my second company, Star Labs, we offer BPO and software development services with a staff of over 200 employees. The main challenge for me today is the lack of candidates with the proper technical skills. The demand for tech services has increased drastically, especially in the last 2 years, and has created a fierce competition. Prices have increased and there is a shortage of employees. Focusing on equality right now is important because women are still underrepresented in the tech sector especially, as they make below 20% of the entire workforce globally. However, this is not the case in Kosovo, and in both of my companies, around 40% of the entire engineering staff are women. Also, in the tech universities in Kosovo, around 40% of all the students who are studying technology are women. The biggest change that I would like to see is in the education sector. I believe that curricula and the teaching method needs to change drastically in order to fit the current student and market needs. I would like to see an education system which is focused more on developing practical skills rather than theoretical skills. I would like to see schools who teach students since the very young age skills such as critical thinking, creative thinking, resilience, stress tolerance and flexibility, problem solving, emotional intelligence, technology and leadership skills. So basically skills which are needed to succeed today and in the future. Thank you.
So skills of the future there. Now, Olje, you're also using innovation in your business, tackling global challenges, food waste, climate change. So are traditional business models serving only shareholders and investors, are they evolving now?
Yeah, definitely. We can start saying it's evolving and it should evolve. Briefly, let me tell what we do. So it's a food waste reduction digital platform that is connecting the surplus owners with the companies who can recycle, donate, resell, and make animal feed from the surplus, so return the best environmental, societal, and financial value. So why we started, it's important here. Back in 2017, I started to think actually the business model should evolve from making only profit and some greenwashing into a socially responsible way of working. And we need to create some examples, either with our own operations or with the collaborations we make with the ecosystem. So then we followed up these UN SDGs because I think they are a very good compass showing where the world should go and how these business models should evolve. And when you look at the businesses, like a business needs to cover a need or a demand, right? So where we are now in the world order asks for better, sustainable, and impactful future. And then the businesses should reply to that need. And when it comes to that, when we look at the current businesses, either they are going to change their way of workings, evolve their business models into more sustainable, impactful ones. They can do it by their internal resources or making collaborations with companies like us, or they are going to be replicated with others coming on the way. And looking back like 5 years ago when I discussed and explained the business model, what we are doing, even the top managements of some of the companies were not understanding why we are doing this, what we are doing, and how it's going to be impactful or affecting their businesses. They were always talking about the profit, but if you establish a profit, impact, and societal values all together in the business model, then it's a win-win-win situation, and then everyone and every business should convert to that model. And I see sustainability and impactful models, new business models like the digitalization of 20 years ago. Is there any company that is left without digitalization now? You cannot survive. And without changing the business models into a better world, I think in the future, like 20 years later, the current businesses will not survive as well. This is why I think we need to evolve for better business models to get a nice world order that we want to live in.
Excellent. Now, Cecilia, I'm going to move to you. So mobile populations, often seen as victims, but they can have a very positive social and economic impact. So what can we do to move beyond the victimhood lens and towards what of agency? What can we do?
Thanks a lot. You know, I'm really happy that you're asking this question, because indeed when we talk about migrants and displacement, it's always the entry point that is vulnerability. And it's so much more than that. And this is something that we have seen time and time again in all crises, how much agency there is among migrants and displaced populations. And that really has to be at the heart of how we are conceiving and designing a response to crisis. And this one is no exception to it. Because really, it's important to say it again, migrants are positive agents of change because of the economic and social contribution that they're making to societies, the societies where they arrive and the one that they leave, ranging, of course, from the way they are utilizing remittances to cover essential, for access to essential services, but much beyond as well in terms of investment, as well as skills transfer that is very much at the heart of innovation in our economies. Not to mention, of course, the philanthropy that is a very strong hold as well of what diaspora can bring. So in a increasingly mobile world, and unfortunately, with more and more crises at our doorstep, it's really important that we put the agency of migrants at the very heart of our response. And I think it's really interesting to reflect on what's happening right now when, for the first time, we have an incredible setup with the rollout of the Temporary Protection Directive that is in effect in the European Union. That's the first time that we have such a comprehensive access to essential services that has been made available, looking at all elements, not only, of course, immediate response to the immediate needs, but also inclusion into the labor market and so on. And this is really a real test case of what we can do to really build on the agency of migrants, and hoping that this will be more and more the case. And if I can just finish with one word, because this crisis is there to stay. If there's something that we have learned from previous crises, that displacement is not something that lasts 1 or 2 years. It lasts for decades, and sometimes decades with an S. So we have to be ready for a scenario like this one in the context of the Ukrainian response. So agency, that's what we have to build from.
That's a very good cue, agency. So I want to hear from Renem now, who fled Syria, but with the help of the EBRD, she defied the odds. She's founded her own company. Take a look.
My name is Renem Safi, the owner and founder of IMSAF, an information management training and consulting company in Turkey. We provide information management related subjects for both humanitarian NGOs and SMEs. Unlike others who start their business when they have good opportunity to, I started mine when I didn't have any other option. Being a refugee in Turkey with weak Turkish language, difficulties in moving between cities, and also difficulties in getting a work permit, in addition to be a woman in a field dominated by men, I took the risk, started my business, and created my own opportunity. The main challenge ahead for me is still to have all opportunities available for all persons, depending on their skills and capabilities. Being a refugee is an example, being a woman is another example. I'm still working hard to make others in the business believe that a woman can lead a company successfully, and that she has totally the same or maybe even more skills and capabilities to make a positive impact. Focusing on equality right now is important because sometimes it turns to become a loop. Excluding a slice of people from good opportunities makes them feel low confidence. Giving up and thinking that they are not able to compete, that leads them to stop trying to improve themselves. When that happens, the whole community will lose a huge opportunity to improve and develop.
Barbara, I'd like to bring you back in here because do you think the Ukraine crisis could end up having a bit of a positive effect on the way governments, NGOs, development banks respond to future crises, potentially by sharpening their focus on inclusion and human capital?
Thank you very much, Chia. And I think in a way, yes. I think there are two key ways in which that could happen. I think the first one is there is an increasing understanding and realization that an immediate crisis response is not enough and can't just focus on the needs of today and right now. I think whatever we do, we need to always have a look forward and see what are the longer term consequences, what are the opportunities, how can we, by supporting countries and people and communities and businesses now, how can we in a way lay the seeds for longer term solutions. We also need to anticipate challenges. I think we very often react only when things actually happen. But I think there is now an increasing realization that we need to look ahead and look at what could actually happen. If you went around the world now and looked at their pandemic preparedness plans, I'm sure they would be in better shape than 3 years ago. So I think we need to look at those things. But also other things, climate change, it's a longer, sort of slower starting crisis, but it's starting in many countries of operation here, but around the world. Digitalization, urbanization, all these other challenges. I think we really need to look at not just ad hoc responses, but longer term responses in this context. And here the human capital and the livelihoods and the people aspect of that response is really critical. And I think the crises that we have seen have shown how important that is. So I think that's the first point I wanted to make. The second one is then to really look at what are those longer term changes that we can make when we look at governance, for example, to introduce much better governance. Digital solutions, how they can actually help now, but also in the longer term about flexible labor markets, online vocational and other training provision, vital reforms on skills, on care provision, of course, flexible labor market regulations. Also the way services are delivered on infrastructure, safe transport, that should be built into how we do transport solutions, not an add-on. Urban connectivity, inclusive urban designs when we rebuild and plan ahead. And of course, very importantly, energy security, where I think the case now is even stronger for diversification towards green technologies in order to reduce that reliance that we have in one area and really focus on increasing energy security for everybody. So just some examples from my side.
And just, we are very coming to the end. We're really running out of time. I'm going to ask just finally, Odile, we know that rising food prices around the world is something that Odile has been talking about at the meeting this week. They're really affecting populations in Turkey, increasing poverty. I just want you to go straight to the nub of this. How is sort of rising food price inflation hitting the refugee community in Turkey, which is very big?
Okay. First of all, recently the food inflation goes up to 90% in overall, in some products like 300%. So it's hitting dramatically the poverty lines. Even a teacher lives under poverty in Turkey. And considering the refugee part, the number of refugees are increasing dramatically. That is, you saw in the video some tent village in Turkey, but they are not only living in tents, but all over the country, all over the streets. And the government, I see, is trying to support too much. They are trying to do their hand, what they can do. But the current situation in Turkey is that also the Turkish people are living under poverty. Together with the increasing refugee numbers, the food inflation going up is a big problem. So in our operations, we give food like around 500,000 refugees yearly. But this is not a solution for food. And what I can say you very critical, one family is either refugee or Turkish, it doesn't matter. One family monthly food purchasing price is more than the minimum wage in Turkey. And the refugees are living less than half of the minimum wage because usually they are not working under social security situations. So then they only need to work like just to buy food. And it's just also valid for the Turkish people currently. Considering the effects of this war in Ukraine, the refugee crisis, and COVID all together, they are just putting new layers on the price inflation on foods. And still, we are expecting in the coming only 2 months, we are expecting 60% over inflation in food prices. And the income levels are just staying in the same level for the last 1 year. So that's the main problem. It's also for refugees in all the country.
A big burden. Thank you for that. And Dr. Levchenko, we've literally just, I want, if you can, in 30 seconds, tell me, what is your best example of progress on gender equality in Ukraine? I just want a positive note to end on, but you've got to do it in 20 seconds because we're so out of time.
Okay, yeah, it's really quite difficult to use that 30 seconds, but if I have only 30 seconds, I'd like to stress that women's civil society organizations inside Ukraine are uniquely qualified, and we have very strong and good cooperation with civil society. And even during this wartime, majority of them remain operational, committed to support Ukraine's women and girls both in Ukraine and abroad. And believe me, my 30 years experience of working with and cooperation with civil society of Ukraine allows me to give such a conclusion. And I consider that it's really very good for gender equality policy, for further development, for including a women's voice in all decision-making process. And I believe we will be successful in this.
Thank you. I think you did that perfectly. And now we are really out of time, but it leaves me to thank our panel. Thought-provoking stuff, I think you'll agree, and I hope the audience does too. Thank you, Dr. Levchenko. Caterina, we thanked before. Barbara, Odile, thank you for coming here. Ahmed too. Sorry we ran out of time. Cecile. Thank you to the audience here in Marrakesh and from around the world. We also ran out of time for the Q&A. But I'd just like to end on a bit of an uplifting note from Anatol from Moldova, who is putting equality at the heart of his enterprise, building affordable green homes.
To me, equality means that we are all created equal in God's image. We hire individuals based on their experience, skill level, attitude, and with those variables, we can train individuals to help us achieve goals and succeed. In those terms, we treat the people, and everybody's welcome in our company to develop personally, professionally, so together we can accomplish great things.